What is up, YouTube? It's your boy BC Chaos. Today we're back for a different type of video. We're going to be talking about my favorite team, the LA Angels, whatever, Anaheim Angels, whatever you want to call them, California Angels, they were once, and the current state of things. As you know, as a fan, I've been through a lot in my entire life. I was only, a month old when they won. They had some great years with Mike Scioscia in the 2000s. And we haven't won a playoff series since, you know, 2009, which is pretty sad considering we had two of the greatest players ever. But let's not get into all that immediately. Let's start talking about, right here. 2002, the Angels win the World Series. Everything's at a high. They're, they just came off their first ever World Series win. They beat the Giants, who obviously have the best player in the game, Barry Bonds. What do? They sell the team. The Walt Disney Group, Walt Disney Company, sells the team to Artie Moreno. And Artie Moreno buys the Angels for $188 million. And if you look at their current valuation, Angels valuation, MLB, you could see that the Angels are worth $2.7 billion, $2.8 billion. That's a pretty good investment from Artie Moreno. And that's probably the only good thing he's ever done. So if we look, at these teams next year, miss playoffs, make it, make the LCS, make the LDS, DS, CS. And that's it. That's the last time the Angels have won a playoff series was, 05, 09. They had some good years there. They made the playoffs 5 of 6 years. You would be happy with that. 100 wins, 97 wins. And then we start to see it dip. And this is where the spending starts to play in. Because if you're looking at, this team right here, 2011, they win 86 games. They finished second in the AL West. If we take a look right here, I'm going to assume it was the Rangers that were first in the division. It was. They were 10 wins better back when the Astros weren't even in the division. Now, what do the Angels do after that season? What the hell did that do? What do they go and do? They go and spend money on two of the best players in baseball. If we look at their 2012 team, this team was supposed to be really, really good. This team signs Albert Pujols, right? I'm pretty sure, C.J. Wilson, yep, right here. And did we get, 3.83 ERA from C.J. Wilson and a 4.8 WAR from Pujols, and this team wins 3 more games. So what does Artie Moreno do? So Pujols signed a 10-year, $240 million, which was a record at that time until A-Rod, ended up breaking it. But C.J. Wilson signed, a 7-year deal, $180 million. What do they go do the next season? They go spending again. Josh Hamilton joins the club. Now, this is one of the worst signings ever. 739 OPS, 21 homers, 1.3 WAR. And Pujols had a 1.6 WAR. And C.J. Wilson has a 3.5. Now, is that worth, 500, 600 million? I'm going to assume most people are going to say no. So what changes? 2014 is the last time we see the Angels make the playoffs. Ever. It's been 11 years and now it's about to be 12. So, Josh Hamilton 1.4, Pujols 3.9. Obviously, Trout's wins the MVP. Kendrick 6.1, Ibar 3.9. There's good players on this team, and the pitching staff was good. C.J. Wilson negative WAR. Look at this. I mean, the Angels spent, let's say, $350 million on Hamilton and Wilson, and they had a 1.2 WAR in that 2014 season where they made the playoffs. They make a trade for Santiago. They get, Skaggs is good. He was better. He got hurt that year too. Richards was really, really good that year. Shoemaker was really good too. I mean, then you got your guy. You have your ace, Jordan Weaver pitching well. You know, Houston Street in the pen, Joe Smith. And then everything goes wrong in the playoffs. They lose all 3 games to the Royals. The Royals have owned us for years, and that ALDS was one of the worst things I've ever watched in my life. If you look, at the Angels, let's see. Angels batting average this series. Josh Hamilton, 13 at-bats. He hit 0 hits. 1 RBI. 0 walks. 2 strikeouts. That can't happen, bro. I mean, Pujols hits 167. Ibar's, their best hitter, Cole Calhoun. And we look at the pitching staff. Let's take a look here now. We go to, ERA. CJ Wilson, 40.5. Again, 300 fucking million, bro. 300 million down the drain with CJ Wilson and Josh Hamilton. He pitches 0.2 innings and gives up 3 runs. It's surely incredible how bad that is. We take a look here at this game where he pitches. He is the starting pitcher in this game, by the way. Oh, brother. Look at this. 0.2 innings in the the playoff decider. The season's over. They don't win, right? And he comes in, 3 earned runs in the first, can't get out of the first. And then it's just to the bullpen. And I barely remember who this dude is. I know the other guys pretty well, but, look at this team. James Shields, Kelvin Herrera, Wade Davis, Greg Holland. That's a good team. And it's just like, where did it all go wrong? If you look at, this game here. This goes to the 11th, obviously, Mike Moustakas homers in the 11th to end that game, basically. But again, 5 plate appearances. This guy hit 0-0-0. Pujols 0-0-0. One of my favorite players ever, bro. Trout 0-0-0. 4 hits as a team in this game. It's just not going to work. Calhoun is 2. Freeze, Iannetta. And they get good pitching, too. Weaver pitches really well. Smith, Street, Jepson. Salas, obviously you give up a homer, but the guy was good all year. But it's like, what has happened since then? We had Ohtani, we had Trout, we had Pujols. That's 3 of the greatest players ever. 3 top 10 batters ever. And we're sitting, just nothing's happening. We can look at the current team payroll. Let's look at some of the signings recent times. So Anthony Rendon is on his final year of his deal. 7 years, $245 million. One of the biggest contracts ever for a third baseman. We take a look here for Anthony Rendon. In 5 years for the Angels, in 257 games, he is a 3.8 WAR. Really, like 100. If you do the math, 162 by 5. That's about, I want to say 760-ish. 760-ish, and you have a 3.8 WAR. Look at this. 916 games he played for Washington. And he had a 30 WAR. Even if he had half of that in those games, that amount of games he missed, he's probably going to end up missing. This would be year 6 for him, right? Oh, no, he didn't even play last year. So this should be year 7. So he would be on the Angels. He would have missed more games for the Angels than he would have for the Nationals, which is just absolutely absurd, man. That's just, the reality of this team. Rendon, he comes off the World Series ring. He comes off, having that clutch home run in the World Series, Game 7. They sign him, dog shit. We bring in Kikuchi, who's off a great year in Houston. And the guy had a decent year last year and has been pretty terrible this one. That's 21 million right there. Now, this is probably the worst signing the Angels have ever made because this guy has pitched in 10 games in 3 years. 10 games. Sorry, 12 games. 2024 missed for injury. 2025 played 12 games. 2.7. Okay, not bad. But when you consider the fact that this guy got paid 3 years, 30 million, and he's going to play 12 games in 3 years as a reliever, considering, he pitched 60 that year, right? Even the year before he had 58, 49, 57. The COVID year is a little different. But when you start to think about, how that, like that kind of spending, it's just absurd. d'Arnaud, they give $6 million, a year. And, last year he had a negative .3. This year he's got a negative .1. I mean, he's got a career 724 OPS, and with the Angels, he's got a 584 in 79 games. Pretty bad, bro. Another great spending right there. Kirby Yates, coming off probably one of the worst years of his career. Negative .5 WAR with the Dodgers, one of the best teams with pitchers. After a year where he was an all-star, the Angels signed this guy. 5.23, 4.76 FIP. Even his whip, if you take a look, 1.331. Not great, man. And now he's hitting age 39 season. What are we doing? Now, here's another one. Drew Pomeranz they signed this offseason. Now, Kirby Yates got $5 million. Drew Pomeranz got $6 million. Coming off his best year in a while. 57 games. He had a 2.1, 3.36, and a 1.067 whip. Pretty good. Best year, probably his best year since he was an All-Star in 2016. That is 10 years ago. And now he's got a 9.26 with the Angels, a 8.11 FIP with a 1.886 whip. Negative .7. $6 million, by the way. So, with the money that they spent on Kirby Yates and Drew Pomeranz, they could have brought back their closer from last year, Kenley Jansen, who was very, very good for them. And instead, they got negative .7 WAR. So, moving on. Moncada, 1 year, $4 million. Guy stinks. They don't do anything. Oh, Josh Lowe even. Josh Lowe, they trade Brock Burke, who had been one of the best relievers for the past 2.5 years. Brock Burke currently owns a .63 ERA in Cincinnati. Josh Lowe's current stats? Oh, let's take a look. Negative .4 WAR. And this is a guy who hasn't been staying healthy. He had the 3.7 and really hasn't produced anything like that in any other year. Negative .4, which would be his worst number yet. Alek Manoah. Why the Angels signed this guy to $2 million? Who knows, man? This guy was flat out terrible in the spring. He could not stop walking every single fucking batter imaginable. His last 2 years with Toronto, he had a negative 1.4 WAR in 24 games. And the Angels go sign this guy for $2 million. Not really sure about that one. Even they give $2 million in arbitration to Nick Sandlin in free agency. Nick Sandlin, who currently owns a negative .4 WAR with a 10.57 ERA. You think by the time, this guy pitches 7 games, he absolutely can't get it through an inning 2 games in a row. You think you'd get rid of the guy. Nope. Still on the roster. Still on the roster today. A guy like Taylor Saucedo, who had good innings for the Mariners, hasn't even seen the majors yet. I know he wasn't good last year, but he had been good the last 2 years. In 105 games, he had a 3.54, basically. It's just sad, man. It really just is, bro. And then, if you think about, guys they already got rid of, Jordan Romano, they signed to $7 million as well. 1 year, $7 million from the Phillies. And if we go take a look at him, I don't think he's on this page here, unfortunately, because they did release him. So if we go right here to Jordan Romano, who was just coming off a terrible year in Philly. He had a negative .5 WAR with a 10.13 ERA, with a 2.125 WHIP and a 4.39 FIP. Saying, he was a little unlucky, but the last 3 years he had a negative WAR, and the Angels still gave this guy $7 million. The Angels still chose this guy. They chose Pomeranz. They chose Kirby Yates over a guy like Kenley Jansen, who, if we take a look at last year, I know he's not as good this year so far, but if we look at what he did for the Angels last year, he had a 2.4 WAR, which is his best number since he was on the Dodgers. 62 games, 29 saves. The guy was pretty freaking good. .949 WHIP, which was his best mark since 2018. Or even 2017, actually. And the Angels decide to go with the likes of Jordan Romano. They decide to go with Drew Pomeranz, Kirby Yates, all who were, accumulating to a negative 1.2 WAR. Even if you put in Manoah and, obviously Yates, who haven't played yet, you're paying, let's see, 2, 5, 7, 6, right? 13 plus 7. So $20 million for negative 1.3 WAR from 4 players, instead of signing a guy who literally just had a 2.4 WAR last year. So, that shit just drives me nuts. And Artie just refuses to do anything. He's talking about, the team, the fans, all they care about. All we want to make the games fun and accessible to all fans, right? So Angels payroll currently 15th in the league. They're the worst record in baseball, right? The Mets are actually worse, and somehow Houston is the same mark. But the Angels are a team who's never lost 100 games in a season. They're the only team in MLB history to never lose 100 games in a season. And look, you could say the same thing about the Mets because they have $335 million in payroll, and that's the most in the MLB, and they were the worst record. But they've been very injured, so it's a little bit different. The Angels really haven't been injured. Trout's been healthy, Neto's been healthy, Soler's been healthy. The lineup is there. The pitching staff is better. I said Kikuchi has been worse, but it's hard to look past the fact that the Angels have 53 million, which is 8th most in the MLB, on their injured list, right? And that's just not acceptable for a team that's only spending 171 million. All these teams have a lot more. 335, 297, 292, 266. Red Sox are just a little ahead. They're only 22 million, but that's another team that just doesn't spend. The Diamondbacks, they signed Corbin Burns. It's the same thing. But we take a look here. Angels bullpen in the last 16 games. Now, this isn't, up to date, super, but, it's missing one game. It's missing that Mets game yesterday, where our starter, Walberto Arena, is having his best start of his career, arguably, and he is hit by a line drive off his kneecap. What happens immediately? The bullpen goes in, and the game is over. They let up 4 runs in 2 innings of work. Arena's given up 1 run. Suter gives up 2. Thanks to Seth blowing it once again. One of the most dogshit pitchers ever. Now, the Angels drafted 20 pitchers, obviously that 1 year. Hasn't done anything for him. Bullpen, last 16 games, 59 innings, 7 ERA, 1.67 WHIP, 11 homers, 7 blown saves. We are 4-12 during the span. Now 4-13, and that is 8 blown saves now, and 7 losses in a row. And that is I believe that is 11 losses in 12 games. Now, here's from Wednesday's game. Wayne Randazzo, Angels announcer, just said the guy on deck is 0-22 against lefties. And our manager decides to bring a righty out of the bullpen. Now, I don't think I've ever seen this in any time in the MLB, myself watching. And I've watched for, most of my life. I have never seen anything like that where you're going against a platoon number like that. That guy can hit lefties, and you're gonna bring a righty in. I can't comprehend that stupidity. We keep going here, right? But with another game on their way to their sixth straight loss, water's wet, skies blue. It's happy hour somewhere, and the Angels are still losing. Right here, David Giglio, 11 blown saves on the season. That is 11 wins turned into losses by the worst bullpen ever assembled. Now it's 12, by the way, since yesterday. So they could be 24-9, and now they are 12-21. No excuse for it. Perry Minasian should not be allowed to finish his extension and be fired tonight. Completely agree. Now let's get into the last bit and piece here with this clown show of a team. Moncada. Adele hasn't been as good this year. I don't know why we're not selling high on him. Obviously, we trade away Taylor Ward. We get Grayson Rodriguez, who hasn't pitched yet. So, let's take a look at this team. Soriano, best pitcher in baseball so far. Kachanowicz has been good. Detmers has been good. Kikuchi, Arena has been good. The WAR is flawed there. Romano, Brent Suter just blew the game yesterday, right? And, Zephyr John, negative WAR. Pomeranz, negative WAR. Silseth has a 5.17 FIP. Not good, bro. That is not a good number. 5.94 ERA for Sean Anderson, who they designated for assignment, released, and now he's back on the team again. He's in AAA, and I'm sure we'll see him again next year and this year. Sam Bachman, first round pick, not great. Nick Sandlin, negative WAR. Klassen, what prospect they got, 2-3 years ago. Furman was spending his time in the minors while we allowed Jordan Romano, Silseth, Pomeranz, and Sandlin to pitch before, Jose Furman, who was our best reliever last year, arguably. Joey Lucchesi has been designated for assignment 2 different times. 2 times here, Joey Lucchesi has been DFA'd. How was our best reliever, Adam Frazier? Let me know. So, Joyce is hurt. Yates is hurt. Rodriguez, Johnson, Manoah, Stevenson, and Rendon out for the year. That's $50 million right there from Stevenson and Rendon on our 60-day IL. Kirby Yates, like I said, $5 million. The other guys aren't making a lot because they're not older yet. But it's just sickening, man. It really is just sickening looking at this. Thinking about the fact that Rendon and Stevenson are 2 of our highest paid players, and they're making $50 million to not play for us. Silseth, like I said, he's just absolutely terrible. And this is just years and years of the same bullshit. Matt Harvey and Trevor Cahill were our premier free agents in 2019 to get us back to the playoffs. We sold the farm instead of trading Ohtani just so we could try and make the playoffs and lose in the first round with them. That's how oh, brother. That's how, mental this organization is. That's how just plain. I don't even know how to put it to words. It's just sickening, man. And I've dealt with this for 12 years. I have seen my team play in the playoffs. One time. In what, 16 years? They won a playoff game when I was 7, right? I was 7 years old the last time the Angels won the playoffs. I was 12 when they last. I was 12 the last time they made the playoffs. And this team has gone nowhere since then. Since 2014, this team's gone nowhere. Downhill, Ohtani, Pujols, Trout, and nothing to show for it. It's just truly incredible how one clown show owner who hires dog shit manager, dog shit GM, just leads us nowhere. Albert Pujols should have been the guy that they hired, clear as day. He wanted stuff changed in the organization. Guess what? They tell him, no, we're not going to do that. He says, see ya. How he didn't get hired for a job anywhere, it's beyond me. I hope, I hope he sells the team, Artie Moreno, and Pujols becomes a manager because he could put this team on a better path. Although they have a lot of stuff to do, you gotta spend money in this day and age, and they're not doing enough. I hope you enjoyed this rant session. I'm not sure I did, but it's been a long time coming. So I'll see y'all.